Okay. Well, thanks for the invitation. It's an honor to be here, and I'm glad that I can try to give you an insight what we think about prevention of use in the Netherlands. So, how did I get here? Where did I come from? I started my career on the upper left in Saint-Moritz in Switzerland, where I saw a lot of knee lesions, of course, mainly to ski accidents. Then I went to Basel, which was Buderholz up there. And I was lucky enough to meet that guy who wrote the book, The Knee, Professor Müller, and he was a great inspiration. From there I went to Amsterdam, so to the Netherlands. And right now I'm working in Delft, somewhere in between. I'm doing here and there a weekend in the Middle East, but that's not important. And it's all about the knee. There are some institutions where I'm part of, and mainly it's sports medicine, and it's all about knee and prevention. So in order to get into the topic, oh, wait a second. It doesn't start. Why doesn't it start?
We were surprised to learn that there's an epidemic of injuries among young athletes in America. Every year, nearly 1.5 million kids suffer a serious sports-related injury.
You know, by the time these kids are 12 or 13, they know someone on their team who had an ACL injury, and to have multiple ACL injuries is almost the norm now.
It is crazy to me that all these 12-year-olds know what an ACL is. I mean, this is the new norm.
Yeah, it's almost like they're not even surprised.
More and more young athletes are suffering so-called overuse injuries. They happen most often to kids who specialize in a single sport from a very young age. The consequences can be devastating.
The number of youngsters playing organized sports is exploding. So too are the number of sports-related injuries rather. But should pain be a part of the game?
So the problem is that the young people do more and more sports, and unfortunately they get more and more injuries. And an injury to a knee can be devastating, and therefore I think that prevention, if possible, should be done. So if we look at the facts, then 90% of all ACL ruptures are related to sports, whereas only 70% are non-contact lesions. So only 30% are with contacts, and those we cannot prevent. There's nothing we can do. But on those 70% we might be able to work. So it's a very common lesion, and it happens with soccer, American football, but as we will see, it's going to happen with basketball, with everything which is pivoting. So Tim Hewitt, who is at the Mayo Clinics, says that prevention programs do work, and we get into that. But if you suffer an ACL injury, then you will not prevent arthritis. So I gave you all these. So what is this? This is about the size and the width and the thickness of an ACL. This is all we're talking about. It's not more than this. It's about 2.8, 2.9 centimeters in length and about 8 to 10 millimeters in the diameter. And this is all that we're talking about. But this little thing can ruin your life. So here you see a classical valgus trauma with basketball, and you can see the inward motion there. And that happens very fast, and I think, Lam, as you know, you've seen that many times. This also, the left knee.
See the play.
There you go.
The left knee right away. And he's critical for the Knicks' success defensively.
And this is the same player from up front. That's all it takes.
Awkwardly on the turn, trying to cross.
It's just the wrong movement. It's a wrong split second. So if we look, how often do things happen? And there's a brilliant paper from the group of Chris Vortulo from 2018, because they have a very good registry there, showing that from 2000 to 2015, the number is increasing, and especially the number in the people below the age of 25. So this is danger zone. This is very difficult. Furthermore, they split it up, and they showed that the overall growth in incidence is 43%. So it's really dramatically. And in the age group below the age of 25, it rises by 74%. And especially in the young, very young age group, 5 to 14 years. That's a problem. So in former times, Kennedy said, the ACL is the most common cause of the ex-athlete, meaning it was a career ending. Nowadays, we try to help then patients to get better later on and go back to sports, but still, it's a life-changing event. And if you want to read a really horrible book, get this book. And it's about American girls, young women, playing soccer, and what their fate is as soon as the ACL tears. And that's the problem. So if we go into the literature a little bit, so here's a study of Pinchevsky from Australia, and he looked at patients aged below 18 years, and in 1 out of 3 patients in 15 years, another ACL tear occurred. And he finds that on the ipsi and also contralateral side, the most vulnerable phase are the first 5 years. Then we realize that if you have a positive family history, that's not good luck. So on top comes that if you return to a ball sport game, you have a very high chance to re-rupture again. So again, once you tear your ACL, you're in trouble. Here's a study from Paterno and Hewitt, and they were looking 12 months after return to sport, after ACL surgery, and they found that 1 out of 4 patients had another ACL injury within 1 year after return to sport. So let's say within 2 years after the trauma or the surgery. And they see that you have a 15 times greater chance to re-tear than those people who never had an ACL tear. And then if you look at female, if you just look at the female group, you find that their chance is even 16 times higher. So all in all, it's a problem. So what is the problem with the ACL, that little thing? It stabilizes your knee, and if you don't have it, your knee makes kind of crazy motions, and the meniscus gets problems, and later on you'll have osteoarthritis. So that's the reason why it is the problem. So here's a study from Janssen from the Netherlands, and he was looking at patients 10 years after ACL surgery, and he found 55%, 54% osteoarthritis 10 years later on, and if you have a meniscus lesion, it's even 65%. So Klaas from Belgium also showed that the meniscus is the key. So finally, I think the ACL is protecting the meniscus. And if the meniscus also has a problem, then you're in trouble. We once did a study, and we also showed after 10 years, 55 to 63% of osteoarthritis. So what is a normal thing that's happening when you have an ACL tear? Let's suppose you're 30 years old. You have your ACL tear. 10 years later, you begin to get some osteoarthritis. And 20 years later, it's getting worse. So where are you in life? You're building your career, you're relatively set, and with 50 you're settled, but you got osteoarthritis. But what if that happens to a young guy? So you're 14, 24 when you see problems, 34 when you get really severe osteoarthritis. And where are you in life then? So this is a problem. So this is a case, came into my office this year. Male, 50 years old, when I saw him. And when I asked him, what kind of work do you do? He said, I'm having an office job. And why is he having an office job? He cannot be active. So he had an ACL tear when he was 18 years old. They tried to suture it, which was not successful back then. Then a couple of years later, he got a meniscus problem. They take part of the meniscus out. And then 3 years after the trauma, they tried a lemare, an extra-articular stabilization. So finally, 9 years after the surgery, after the trauma, he got an ACL reconstruction. And now, these are the pictures that I'm seeing. He's coming in like this. So if you look contralateral, no trauma, same person. This is how his knee should be, and this is how it was. And this is something which is 20 years later. And a month ago, he received this, being 50 years old. That's a problem. So I got infected with that ACL prevention thought back in 2008 at the ACL study group meeting in Engelberg. And I met this guy, Tim Hewitt. And he's my hero. Let's be very clear in this. He started back in the 90s doing research. He's just a scientist. No orthopedic surgeon, no whatsoever, so he's a pure scientist. And he was looking at ACL and neuromuscular problems, and I heard that, and I was kind of struck by lightning. I never heard anything before, and I thought, this is it. This is interesting. So I was really astonished, and I followed this. So then there's some info about understanding and preventing non-contact ACL injuries. As I said, those 70%. I never heard anything about it, but then that changed. We had a good time back then in Engelberg. And 2 years later, I was asked to give a talk at the AGA in Vienna about clinical results, children and adolescents. And is it the same as in adults? So I went into that topic, and no, it's not the same, as I showed you earlier. When you're a child, you will ruin your life, even your sports life, even your social life. So I said, there's a male and female different, and the question is, why is that? So the overall incidence for ACL surgery is about 0.5 to 3% that you will get an ACL injury. But females have a 4 to 6-fold risk, and also a higher risk on contralateral. And the left one is what we see, and the right one is what we want, that you be active when you're still old. So this is a tennis congress. There are also tennis lesions that you can have. You see it up there, and you see it on the upper left. It's rare, but it happens. And it's a split second. It changed your life. So going back to the gender difference, there have been several studies already in the 80s and 90s showing that this is a factor that women have a higher chance of achieving an ACL injury. And if we look at a study from England from 2008, you see the difference. This is a peak that women have, and here also you get the peak for the male. And if you look at the timeline here, it's below the age of 20 or 24, which is danger zone. So this is a study, I come back later on that. That is the one from Chris Fortulo that I showed. Okay, so these data are from 2008, and this is from 2015. And this is just the same. This is male, and this is female. And it's almost identical to the data 10 years earlier. So it's not changing. So what is the reason that women have a higher chance, a higher risk? Well, you got the hormonal problems. Let's say once every month your ligaments are a little bit weaker. You got some anatomical differences, meaning the pelvis is broader, therefore you rather have a valgus knee. And that is a problem, but that cannot be changed. But this can be changed. There are neuromuscular differences, and these can be changed and these can be addressed. Now look at this.
December 2009 was up at Killington for my first event of the season, Rails to Riches, and I felt a little tired after qualifiers, made it through to finals. Took the first run, felt pretty good, wanted to start going for it, working some new tricks, and unfortunately came off that box a little too early to a flat landing, and boom.
Sports that involve a lot of turning and twisting or planting and pivoting are the sports that people are at highest risk for getting an ACL tear. Women in particular, right after their growth spurt, get nice long legs but don't automatically get the muscle mass to support them. And that can be kind of a key window of vulnerability for getting an ACL tear.
Oh, the last thing that you said is very important. When you look at the growth spurt of the young people, then women more than men grow intensely. The bone is already on size, but the muscles are not, and the tendons are not. And that is a very difficult phase. This is Dutch, but here you also see that you got it. This is knee lesions in the Netherlands from 2012. So you see that's 15, the group 15 to 24 has the highest risk. Okay. So that's one, but then if you look what's happening later on when you get an ACL, what is the risk on the secondary prevention, or if the secondary prevention fails? So here's a paper from Greg Meyer and Kate Webster, and they say that the overall second ACL injury rate is 15%. But if you're below 25, it's 21%. And if you look at those people who try to return to sport, it's 20%. So overall, it's somewhere between 23-25%. And it's very important to address the neuromuscular problem. Another patient. Now she is 25 years old, female, classical. With 17, she got an ACL tear. These are the pictures after surgery. The other knee was infected just 2 years later, and that is happening very, very often. Patients come back within 2 years, and either the same side or the contralateral side has a problem. Okay, now she's 19, having 2 ACL tears. So what happened later on, being 25, she got a re-rupture, she got a bucket handle, and she got a revision in 2 stages. The first, we fill the canal here because this was drilled through and through, and this is filled up again with a bone from the iliac crest. And later on, she's getting this. So now she's 25 years old, having 3 ACL surgeries. And that's a classical case, and that is what we don't want. So, talking about the main neuromuscular mechanisms, you got ligament dominance, quadriceps dominance, trunk dominance, and leg dominance. And all 4 have to be addressed. So, talking about ligament dominance, you're talking about the absorption of the ground reaction forces by the knee in joints and ligaments rather than the posterior chain muscular. Is it correct? Okay. Then you have quadriceps dominance, seeing here that you use the quadriceps to stabilize the knee at landing rather than the posterior chain. So it's all about balance. Then you got the leg dominance. Usually you have one leg which is a little bit stronger or the other one is weaker. And you got to address that as well. And then, as you could see here on the lower left, the trunk dominance, that your hip, your pelvis, that is working correctly. And Tim and Kate, they did a study which was published last year, and they did a meta-analysis to look, are these programs working? And yes, they do. So they showed an overall reduction of risk of ACL injuries for 50%. And for non-contact ACL in female, it was even higher. So there's much more literature on female, but also the evidence for male is getting higher and higher. So when we take that information, and we can do a lot of more studies, but we know it's working, then why don't we start? So in the ACL study group, we got that mission statement, which is very nice, which looks really nice. And then here it says injury prevention. During the last meeting, there were 88 talks on the ACL. 88 talks on this, but only 3 on prevention. And that needs to change, and we got to address this, and I'm glad you're all here. So if you look at the world, to be honest, there are not so many programs who are addressing this. You have the US, you have the Netherlands, you have Lithuania, Germany, and you got some and very good things in Australia. So just or two examples from Germany. This is a guy who's working in his private office, but who's doing tests in order to try to prevent a second ACL. But the day he's seeing them, they are patients already. But we don't want to address patients. We want to prevent, or at least risk reduction. So the German Knee Society had this program, Stop X, and you can find it online, and that's nice, and the exercises are described. But still, you got to put it on the street. Now, thanks to the slides that you provided me with, you're working hard here, as I know, and these two guys, they're great. Okay, they are doing a lot of things here, and so you're looking at prevention, diagnostics, and return to play, and you're all focusing on that one player. And as I understood, you did some pre-season musculoskeletal screenings in order to see what is the risk that patients are sporters, athletes are having, no patients yet, and you did several tests. And finally, you showed that knee is very high at risk. And here it's just 21%, but if you look at knee cartilage and meniscus, then later on you'll find out that knee is really at risk. And you did great work, and I'm glad that we met last year, and we're going to work much more on this. And we're also working together in the ESMA work group for ACL prevention. Okay, so let's go to Australia. Australia, as I said, has a very good registry. But there was no national prevention program, and they tried to establish that. And everything was just ad hoc and local. So they came up with the idea, safe sport for kids, because prevention is always better than cure for sure. And they published some things, some papers. And now they have a program with all these stakeholders. So let's say all the nation is reunited and is united, and I think that is something which is very special. But I mean, Australia is kind of an island, pretty big island, but it is. But they managed to do so, and here, this is the email that they got from the politics, that they put 2 million in a neuromuscular trainings program. And I think for that country, Australia, that's a great thing, but still it's very difficult to get it off the ground. The next speaker will be Joe Janowski, and I was honored to meet him last year, and we talked about this topic, and they are doing great work there. And if you look here on the left side, this is very important. If you want to do prevention, then you all have to work together. The sports coach, the physical education teacher, sports administration, the parent, the young athlete, and the clinician. And if you cannot manage to get all those hands on deck, you will fail. So there, as well as I'm going to show what we are doing, you get some exercises that you try to give to the people in order to reduce the risk. And to be honest, it's just about the warming up to do it correctly. That's all it needs to reduce the risk. So what is an injury prevention program as we think about? First of all, it's about awareness. A lot of people have no idea that it is there, that is important, what are the consequences. So then you go to education, you try to implement it, and then you will need staff training. When you go a little bit further, you want to address the neuromuscular deficit targeting. Software and application might be nice, and quality control is important. We're somewhere here, I'm going to show you. But data analysis and research and development is also important, but therefore you would need either an academic center or something like the HSS. Joe, you're going to tell us about it later on. So what we did in the Netherlands, we call it joint forces. And if you type in joint forces in Google, then you're going to end up with the army, so we had to put it to J forces. So we started in 2010, and we really started thinking first and how to approach the patient, how to approach the athlete, whom do we approach do we approach the coach, the physiotherapist? Who's going to do it? But very difficult how to make someone aware of something that he or she will never feel until it's too late. So you got to implement it. What are you using? Social media, marketing, what will you do? This young woman was a couple of years ago the most famous field hockey player in the Netherlands, and she's supporting it. And what she's saying here is, if I had known earlier, because she also had an ACL tear. The next thing is a video that we got from Tim Hewitt. And this is the drop vertical jump test. Very easy jump. You see how the male is jumping, how the female is jumping. Look at this. This is what's happening. Also males sometimes do it, but this is something that you can address. Yeah? So the valgus collapse, that is something that you can address. So what we do with our joint forces, we go to the people. We go to schools, we go to sports clubs, and we tell them, and we test them. And when you think, no, this is not happening, what you see here, it is. Try it. Take a little box, jump like this, and you'll be surprised how many people have this. And if you give them some training, it's getting better. So we try to get everyone from school and all the people from the sports clubs that we go to, and we test them. And just a drop vertical jump, and then we see about 20% have deficits. And those 20%, we go and take the normal GROM. This is something that Greg Meyer has established. And what it does, it has some values here. And you just put them here into that chart. And at the end, you get a probability of high knee load. That doesn't give you the risk chance of tearing the ACL, but it shows you whether you're in danger or not. And when you see that, and when you see where the problem is, then you can address it. So this is how we measure it. This is how we do it. And when you measure it and you see, for instance, knee adduction during landing, then you can analyze and say this is ligament dominance and you got to train for the proper technique. Or if you have an asymmetrical landing, you have to address leg dominance. So those 20% where we measure and where we see they have a higher risk, those can be addressed. So a lot of things have to be measured, and you got this system, you got marker system, and this is what we want to reach. As you see here, this is a nice pelvis, the trunk is okay, and this is what we don't want. So we go to the people on the fields, and that's what we try to achieve. So this is one of those films where we go to the school and we test. And I think you really have to begin at the basis. You got to go to the schools, you got to go to the sports clubs. I know that Joe will talk about it later on, and I think this is the approach that you have to do. The professional sporters all get it, but you need exercises, you need to provide the people with these exercises, and then go to them. So we have 3 different times of warming up. Yesterday we talked about it, and this is number 1. Now. So we are addressing agility, strength, speed, and jump. This is a field how it should be. This is a most simple one, and as you can see here on the jumping, it's only one exercise, and when you go to the second one, you see more here, and this is more or less the same. It was interesting yesterday, and I cannot really respond to it, but yesterday I heard that there are people who cannot walk, who cannot run backwards. And it's very important to see that the group of athletes that you're working with can do those exercises, and you just don't give them to them, but they have to really be able to do it. This is the second warming up. Same field. And this is just the same as the first one, and later on it's getting more complicated by the jumps. This is a little bit more complicated, and it's very, very important that whenever you do those warming ups and those exercises, that you have to teach the people how to do it. But if you do it wrong, then you're missing. We're going to skip that video, but here you see the jumping's getting more and more, and this is you only have this in the beginning, and for the rest it's this. But this is for the higher athlete, or this is for the people being, let's say, 17 to 23 years old who can do so, but the young people they will not be able to do so. Okay, so what we try to do in order to get the message to the people, we once or twice a year we send out a small newspaper to the people, and at the office or at the sports physio office we try to measure the people wherever possible. So this tiny little country is the Netherlands, and this is where we go, and these are the people. So right now we have about 80-something sports clubs and about 100 physiotherapy offices who try to work with this. And what we just try to do is to spread the word and help the people. So we're looking at adolescents aged 11 to 23 years, and we do field tests as the drop vertical jump. And when we see there's a problem, then we take them to special centers. And it's difficult to measure as we're a small institution, but at least we're trying. So, as I said in the beginning, we developed some things. So we have the tests in an app. You can the athlete as well as the sports coach or physiotherapist can address all the exercises at any time in order to have a look. How should I do it? What needs to be done? And that's all in the app. Furthermore, what we have is that we have that software program in order to get all those data. This is the old system where we still used markers. Nowadays we don't do that no more, but I don't have that on film. And this is a group of patients that has a neuromuscular deficit, and where we see that there's a problem. And with all that, we're talking about primary prevention. So we're trying to avoid the injury or to reduce the risk of the injury. That you will have secondary prevention, that is important, as we all know, and that if you have an ACL tear, that later on you have to take the same neuromuscular tests and exercises. We know, but we try to reduce the risk. With software, everything is online in the cloud. I'm really glad that we got the opportunity to be here to exchange with you guys in order to make this much better and to go from awareness all the way around. So what we do, we have 3 different age groups that we're testing. We have 3 different levels, as I could show you, and we're going for a neuromuscular training. We have the nomogram in order to look for the probability of high knee load. We get the software and data collection, and we have the app, and we want the neuromuscular deficit targeting. And now there's a small film, and I think that says it all. I could have stopped my whole talk, but I think this film will show us.
In the Netherlands, there is a growing number of children in the age group of 12 to 18 who suffer from a knee injury during sports, girls more often than boys. There is a risk of overload, tear or damage of the knee ligaments. Because of how they grow during puberty, the rate of injury is 4 to 6 times higher with girls than with boys. Ligament injury is one of the more serious injuries one can have at this age. Normally, rehabilitation takes about 12 months. Additionally, it has been shown that this group is more susceptible to wear and tear on the knees in later life.
However, the solution is very simple. By means of a simple but scientifically founded test and warm-up as a training program of joint forces, the chances of contracting a forefront or other knee injury can be reduced by 50 to 60%. The proven training program of joint forces has been developed on the basis of long-term research in both America and Norway, where it has been used for 15 years. The simple but purposeful exercises ensure that the muscles and tendons around the knee become stronger and firmer, reducing the chance of a cruciate ligament injury and making the children move better. A test cycle has also been developed that can be used to measure which children have an increased risk. Based on these measurements, the exercises of these young athletes can be adjusted so that they can also reduce their chance of an injury by 50 to 60%.
These locations have already implemented the exercises and they are well prepared for the future that needs them. Avoid an old knee in a young patient. Prevent injuries, improve performance. Let children play sports now and in the future.
It looks nice. It really looks nice, but it's difficult. Let's be honest, it's very difficult to get it to the people. And what we try to achieve that is getting more and more spread. And this is not about a person. This is not about you, it's not about you, it's not about me. It's about helping children to make it better. So I think when we join the forces, when we really go and help each other and try to support, then I really think we can make this a much better place.
But for today, try to avoid an ACL injury by maintaining your strength, by doing jump training, which helps train how you land, by learning how to fall in skiing, and really for young women, particularly training both their quadriceps and hamstring muscles in specific ACL preventive exercises do seem to help reduce the injury rate.
So what we want to do is we want to focus on life and focus on the good things in life. But when you see what an ACL tear, whereas a child is playing and having fun and wants to do some sports, and there are unfortunately not a lot of people who want to do sports at that age, but if they want to do sports and still they have this little injury, and it changes their life, and we can do something about it. I think if we don't, then there's a problem. I'm really looking forward now to the talk of Joe Janowski in a couple minutes. And when we met last year, we said let's try to work together, let's try to meet, and let's try to do something in order to make it better. For the rest, there is the German program. There's a prevention committee all over, but we have to do more than this. We shouldn't talk about it, we should do it. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks for the presentation. Do we have the questions? Any ideas about the topic, what we had heard?
Okay. Professor.
Okay, Thomas, we talked a lot about this, but anyway, just question maybe to make idea for the audience, to help to understand what you are doing. You are a great surgeon, doing ACL in 25 minutes. Yeah, doing 5 ACLs per day.
You shouldn't drink.
So, and participating in prevention program. This is unlogical. And okay, did you lose some patients?
Well, first
How you survive?
Well, you're addressing several aspects. You're addressing at the end the monetary aspect. Okay, I don't know. Have you ever seen a dentist who is having sweets in his waiting room? So he's not. So this is what you get there. You get those small comics, how to brush your teeth and so on, and maybe those little tubes of toothpaste and so on. That's what you get. And us being doctors, I think it's the biggest mistake you can make not to think, could I prevent, or what will be the long-term consequences? Because what I showed in the beginning, the long-term consequences are devastating. Really, I have 2 children being aged 10 and 13. They may break their bone, whatever, but do not tear the ACL, just not. Because this is going to change your life forever. So I think it's our task to see what can we do in order to prevent. I think we have to give the whole package. See, I'm not the whole package. You know why not? I'm a knee surgeon, but the only thing I'm doing is arthroscopic knees. I'm not doing a total knee. I'm not doing an osteotomy. I'm not a whole knee surgeon, but still I am. But on that field that I'm in, I try to cover everything. Now, addressing the point, are you losing patients? No, you're not. You know what the nice thing is with prevention program? It's a kind of 6 times in a row win-win section. The athlete is winning. The coach is winning. The sports club is winning. The physiotherapy is winning. Because let's be honest, the physiotherapy is doing the training, not me. I have no clue about it. I mean, he knows it. You know, I don't. You also don't? Okay. So the physiotherapy office is seeing more patients because they're accelerating by doing something special. And now going to the doctor. I never saw more ACLs since I'm talking about prevention. Because people know I know a bit about it, and they come. But the second point is you're addressing time. It costs time. This is my free time, but I'm enjoying this. I'm enjoying you guys, and I'm enjoying this. And I think when you're in that field, and whether you're a surgeon or a kinesiotherapist or a physiotherapist or sports medicine, whatever, if you don't go on that mission, you should stay home and do something else. Any more questions?
No more questions.
Now maybe from the audience.
I have to drink.
Yeah, I remember that one. And I'd add la la la. Okay.
Okay.
So thank you, Professor, for a wonderful talk. I wanted to ask, like you mentioned in earlier, like in the slide, it was like early specialization is a major cause of injuries also. So in your training program, have you tried to add also early diversification in the kids, or only neuromuscular training?
Well, it's neuromuscular training that we're doing, and what we try to do with the asthma program. I mean, if you go into prevention, then I think you need a core program, and from there the different sports you need to specialize more. For judo you need this, and for basketball you will add on this one, and for soccer this one. For instance, skiing, very different, because on skiing you have those forces that come from the mountain and you cannot control those. Does that answer your question?
I wanted to ask, like you said they have more prevalence of injuries, but like when you start adding early diversification and when you go for the specialization, because this is a very hot topic in the sports coaches, like you usually start with early diversification, but we don't know when we need to actually start with the specialization for the athlete.
About sports specialization, when it should
When it should be the...
I mean, I think that's you mean for the athlete himself.
For the athlete, yes.
I think that's very difficult, and I think what's one problem of our time is that we all think, and that's also due to the internet and the smartphone and everything. We think everything's available right now, right here, and in earlier times, and this is also written in that book, Warrior Girls. In earlier times, you did sport, and it was fun, and maybe you even did competition. But nowadays, if you ask someone what kind of sport you do, they don't say track and field. Yeah. They say, I do the 100 meters, or they do 110 hurdles, or whatever. So they're specializing very early. And I think that's a problem, but it also depends on what kind of sport you do. I mean, most of the sports that I showed was ball. Okay, so ball sport, very dangerous, but ball sport also is a team sport. So that's something that people do. They play soccer, they play hockey, they play basketball, tennis, whatever. But that's specialization. I couldn't tell when to start with it. I just realized that it's getting earlier and earlier.
Thank you.
I just want to add there are two papers which came out about sports specialization and the danger with it comes. So there are some clues about when to start different type of sports, but actually there's a table of 5 or 4 sports with when to start to specialize the child and actually to do it safe. So we don't have a lot of data about that, and I think the problem is that the science cannot calculate the risk in each sports, in each group, and so on. And I think one of the problems why we don't have strong evidence about prevention programs, which actually works 90% or 95% because of the very difficult ways to prove it, because you have to, as we did in our research from, let's say, we have researched 400 basketball players, female basketball players in 4 years, and we got the data about 10 injuries of ACL, and we got the data before injury. So only the data before the injury can show in what kind of condition the sportsman was when he got the injury. You know what I'm talking about? So it's very difficult to catch the moment and to know the exact situation. So it's a problem, but
I was talking to a colleague friend of mine at the Mayo Clinics, Dan Saris, and he had a brilliant idea. As you're talking about, we don't know what is the data before. And they came up with the idea that everyone, especially the young people, have either a smartwatch or a smartphone, and to be honest, they record everything. They tell you how many steps you made or whatever, so your activity level can be kind of measured. So their idea was, okay, when we know what the activity level is before, then we know which kind of activity level the patient then should reach later on. And we can do it by the same means, by the things, the smartphone and all the things they're having. So what they did, and what he said is, we called Apple. And a week later, Apple came. I mean, I can tell you this. When I call Apple in the Netherlands, no one will answer the phone, and of course, no one will come. And I know how it's over here. But if the right institution is calling, and if you do it in the right country, that might be an idea. And then you can compare later on, are you back to the same level? Of course, it's out of any medical test set that we saw so far, but you have something which is recording the data. But I think it's a very broad field.
Thomas, you showed great table. Can you explain after you test? The kids landing. Leg dominance, imbalance, anything, you find out the problem. Mm-hmm. Can you explain how you correct this problem? Do you send to physio? Do you send to special center? Do you have some team to correct that?
Yeah.
And how to control it? To repeat the test after 2 months after?
Right. So what it usually takes when you see that you have your neuromuscular deficit, and you test them and you see the reason for it, then what you got to do is you give them specified tests, exercises, and you got to try to address that deficit that you're having from the 4 that I was talking about. And then usually after 6 to 8 weeks, you see that the data are getting better, the normogram is getting better. But you can address the problem, and what we do, so everyone get this warming up in order to make them better, in order to reduce the risk. And those where we measure that there is a problem, we addressing that problem, whereas the rest of the group still going on with the normal warming up, and they get the normal warming up plus the extra exercises. And if you address the exercises, then you can correct it, and then later we only send them back to the field. But of course the problem is that everywhere in the Netherlands, no. So what we're trying to do, we're trying to tell the people, we're trying to lecture them, to give them courses, and to give them the means to do so. But it's difficult. It's a lot of work. Thank you.
Do we have more questions?
You mentioned, and we know that valgus knee after landing creates a risk on ACL tear. But what do you think when the knee is going to valgus position in push-off phase? Because I heard that it makes the jump more efficient and it's not at the risk. The risk is only at the landing phase.
The landing is a risk, because then you get the ground reaction forces that will kill your ACL. Was jumping, it's not. But I think in total you have to look to correct the imbalance. And as I said, women have a little bit more risk, but in that phase, I don't think there's a problem. What's your experience there?
I think that it's about the eccentric muscle work during the landing.
The landing, it's a landing. It's not the.
Yes, because when you are going up, your muscle contracts, and when you are landing, your muscles are working in eccentric mode, which is usually the problem, and the muscles are skipping the control at the milliseconds, and that's why you are having the shearing force cutting out the ACL. So probably is the problem with eccentric muscle load, and of course neuromuscular control, which comes from the nerve system, of course.
Does that answer your question? Anyone else?
Okay, so thank you very much. Great talk, nice ideas.